Welcome to the Album Anniversary Podcast. Today's show is about Cracked Rear View by Hootie the Blowfish. It was released July 5th, 1994, and is celebrating a 30-year anniversary. Hi, I'm your host, Caleb, or Caleb the Spy on Twitter and Instagram, and every day on those social media sites, I post about what I call album anniversaries. Look, it's just a fancy, I don't know if fancy is the right word, it's a fancy name for the anniversary of the album's release date. Sometimes I don't know the release date, so I just throw a date on the calendar to take that opportunity to celebrate that album, and that's how this all started. A couple years ago, I did create a calendar to celebrate the release dates of some of my favorite albums. In the last year, the list of albums has grown significantly, and I now have over 2,000 albums tracked on my calendar. On this show, I often focus on alternative rock, punk, and my strange obsession with ska. In the 90s, I was super into the Christian music scene, so that comes up often on the show. And I've always had a fascination with historically important albums or musical events. On today's show, we have our first return guest, Kevin, who joined us previously on the episode about Throwing Copper, and he has returned to answer 5 simple questions about Cracked Rear View by Hootie and the Blowfish. Kevin, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining me again.
Hey, it's great to be back. I'm excited.
I think you are my first return guest. I have a couple other lined up, but I think you're the first one that'll get released. Now I'm doubting myself, but I think you are. I think you're my first return guest who's gonna hit the airwaves. So I'm really glad you were able to come back again. We had talked about Throwing Copper. I said that really with a weird accent there, but we talked about live Throwing Copper last time you were on the show, celebrating a 30th anniversary, and here we are going to talk about Cracked Rear View by Hootie and the Blowfish, also celebrating a 30-year anniversary. So yeah, I'm super excited you're back.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back talking about an iconic album. Definitely, in my opinion, on the Mount Rushmore of 90s rock albums. And I know we'll get into that later. But yeah, happy to be here.
Well, so like I said, live Throwing Copper was the last one on. So usually I kind of do a little intro. I'm going to skip that this time. You can go back and check that out if you want to learn more about Kevin and his history. Really cool story in that one. It's a good job or a good place to pump that album because that episode shared a really cool story about meeting a musical hero of his who we're still going to try and find time to bring you back for an album by Rich Mullins. So that's really exciting. And then I will say that episode was part of the inspiration to transition to kind of this new format. Before I'd been trying to recap a week, and this was really, it felt like if you and I hadn't met before we did that episode, and I was like, I think it turned out good. He was excited to be on the show. I was excited to have him. So that episode was really important for me in kind of the shift of the format of the show. So I'm glad it worked out before, and I'm glad you're back again. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great.
Awesome. Well, that's a lot of me jabbering on. So with that out of the way, I think we can jump right in. So, like I said, we're talking about Cracked Rear View by Hootie and the Blowfish, released July 5th, 1994, not July 4th. So, but probably a good album. I feel like it's a good album to listen to on July 4th. That's a whole other thing. So I'm going to run through some fun facts like I always do on the show. Kevin, jump in whenever you want to add anything to it. This was their debut album, but a couple of these songs had been on an EP they self-produced that apparently, I was watching some video on this, apparently that EP self-produced sold like 50,000 copies. So some of these songs had been around with them for, I think, almost 10 years, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, so that was this is their first official release, though. This album was produced by Don, oh man, I should have thought this out ahead of time, Gehman? I'm going to say Gehman. He had produced John Mellencamp. He had produced something for REM and Tracy Chapman. So kind of similar stuff in a lot of ways. I can see similarities to all of those. Not the exact same by any means, but So that seems like a good choice for a producer. And I mean, this probably got to be his biggest thing he's ever produced, because we'll get to it in a second. Monster sales wise. So I was not familiar with Don Gehman before looking this up. This was released to positive critical reviews, and it eventually became one of the highest, like we mentioned, one of the highest selling albums in the United States, and also one of the best selling albums worldwide. It has sold over 20 million units. I don't know if we'll cover a bigger a bigger album on this show. Reached number one at one point, 21 times platinum, which is double diamond as of 2018. So still selling, which is pretty incredible. And it is the joint 19th best selling album of all time in the United States. A monster album.
A little bit about Hootie and the Blowfish, and touch back on this before this album came out, and I meant to mention this. So for those that don't know, they kind of got their start in the college bar scene.
Yep.
South Carolina, I think they all went to South Carolina. Darius Rucker, I think, said he went there for a year. One of them went for like a year, and then school was just not his thing. but but they met up with another 90s musician, Edwin McCain, who was bebopping around in the area too, and they collaborated on a lot of stuff. And yeah, we'll get into that later too. Cool
Yeah.
recent story involving those two acts. But yeah, so I know REM's a huge influence of Darius Rucker and Hootie and the Blowfish. In fact, Let Her Cry, Michael Stipe's name is used in one of the lines. So they are huge REM fans. In fact, they just released a cover of Losing My Religion on Spotify last month. So
nice.
Pretty cool.
This is the second band that we've covered that's had a connection to REM. That's funny. Because live, we talked about their connection with REM as well.
Yeah.
So, which it makes sense considering how much of a force REM was in the kind of the indie college radio station crowd of the 80s. So that makes sense. You get these mid-90s bands looking back at them. I know Radiohead has said how much REM was an influence. So that's kind of interesting that REM keeps on coming up in our conversations.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So this album had 5 singles. And like I mentioned, some of these had been around with the band for almost 10 years because they had been on that EP. They had toured on them. And I thought I read one thing that by the time they had toured, because even this album didn't blow up right away, and then it blew up huge. So they were, even a year after the album released, obviously they were still playing those singles. And I think they were kind of running on empty on some of them, almost like excited to play something else because they had finally blown up. But I'm just going to run through them real quick. It's Hold My Hand, Let Her Cry, Only Want to Be With You, Time, and then Drowning. I'm good at English.
Drowning,
that's
yeah.
the only one that is not a huge like MTV VH1 hit. Those other 4, I all distinctly remember those being on the radio. So 4 massive hits and 5 solid singles off this album.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually surprised that the opening track, Hannah Jane, was never a single, because I think it's a really strong opener, and I think it's a catchy song too. Drowning is one of my favorite songs on the album, actually. It's I'm surprised that one wasn't bigger. The chorus just it's a really awesome driving chorus, and the vocals and the harmonies in the vocals are in the chorus are just really good. So, but anywho, yes, you're definitely right. Massive singles.
Yeah. That was one I did not even remember that one until I was like re-listening this week, and I was like, even then I don't remember hearing it on the radio, but it also could have been when the radio stations I was listening to it just didn't pop, but I don't even remember that one. But the other 4 I remember hearing everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else to add on any of those fun facts?
Let's see. Oh, so Hold My Hand, which is and I recently learned this. So as I mentioned earlier, connecting Edwin McCain back to Hootie and the Blowfish, I recently went and saw Hootie again. I saw them a long time ago. Only seen them once. They still will play every so often, and they actually just launched a tour, Summer Camp with Trucks tour. Edwin McCain opened, and Collect the Soul was the second opener. I've seen Edwin McCain and Collect the Soul multiple times. Really awesome show. Sold out, massive pavilion area in Dallas. But Edwin McCain, like I was saying earlier, and Darius Rucker and the Hootie guys go way back, and they had actually collaborated on Edwin's first major label release. It was actually the one before the album that I'll Be, which is what launched him. Yeah. But a song called Solitude was kind of Edwin McCain's kind of somewhat decent radio hit. And Darius Rucker sings on that one on the album.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool during the concert. Edwin McCain came back out during Hootie's set, and they did that song together. But Darius Rucker gave us actually, and I'm sure he has said this in books or interviews before, but a little backstory on "Hold My Hand." Obviously, their biggest single.
Yeah.
The drummer, who was the last person to be hired in the band, when he was hired, Darius, he even admitted, he goes, he got hired. He was good for the band. I just didn't like him. He just got on my nerves. Like, it was, I guess, personality conflicts. I don't know. But after 40 years of playing together, I guess you can just be a little honest about it. And then they were sitting there doing a songwriting session, and he goes, I think the guy's name is Sonny. I think that's the drummer's name. And he says, "Hey, I have a song." And Darius even admits, he goes, "Yeah, I kind of rolled my eyes like a jerk. Like, okay, drummer, what song do you have?" And it was basically 80-ish% of "Hold My Hand." And of course, they all then collaborated on it. But if it weren't for the drummer, there'd be no "Hold My Hand."
Funny. Dave Grohl makes the joke that the fastest way for a drummer to get kicked out of a band is to say the phrase, "Hey, I've got an idea for a song."
Yes, I've heard him say that before, yeah.
And there you go. It turns into their biggest hit.
Biggest hit, yep.
That's awesome.
You know what? "Only Want to Be With You" was a fun music video. That's the one song where if I'm going to skip one, I kind of skip that one. I don't know.
Wow.
I know. That might be a hot take.
Yeah, we'll have to get into it in the favorite songs part of it, because my feeling is totally different. That's so fun.
Yeah.
All right. We'll save it for that section. We'll argue to the death.
Definitely.
I think you'll win. How did you discover this album?
So, like most people, when this album came out, it was either watching MTV when they still played music, VH1, or listening to the radio. I didn't listen to a whole lot of radio, so it was mostly MTV and VH1. Hold My Hand was all over the place. I mean, on both platforms, constantly going. And even though I was in the throes of my, 90s, grunge rock era, hey, if the music's good, I like it. And I'm like that to this day. Just because something may not be in my wheelhouse, if it's good, it's good. And if I like it, I like it. And Hold My Hand, I mean, just catchy melody, catchy harmony. And I'll tell you what, I mean, how can you not like the smooth voice of Darius Rucker? I mean, the guy can sing. So, and then the harmonies in that song were just awesome. And a lot of people, unless they read the liner notes, don't realize David Crosby from Crosby, Stills and Nash, from the Byrds, from one of the most iconic musicians of the 60s and 70s, he sings harmony and background vocals on that song.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
So yeah, if you know kind of his high pitch, the way his voice sounds, put some headphones on next time you listen to it, especially in the chorus, you can hear him. So
okay, cool.
I heard that song, and then went and immediately bought the CD and wore that thing out. And what was awesome, it was also one of those CDs that, my mom, I got into music because my mom, the Beatles, stuff like that. But, Nirvana wasn't really her jam. But at 13 years old, Hootie The Blowfish, hey, this is something mom also digs and could listen to it and on car rides. And so that's another reason I kind of discovered that album. And at that time was also, I was learning to play guitar and so forth. And they had a lot of songs on there that were fairly simple. Like Let Her Cry is all of 3 or 4 chords, I think. And it's the typical G, C, D. And I think they throw an E minor in there somewhere. So, and the little guitar riff in Time, that was one of the first little riffs I learned to play too. So so that's how I kind of first discovered that album.
I think I'm real similar, even though I didn't have MTV or VH1 growing up. I think occasionally I'd watch it at a friend's house and definitely saw it, but I actually don't remember any of the videos except for the one, I think it's for I Only Want to Be With You, where all the sports figures are in it. That's the only one that I can visually remember.
Dan
I think
Marino.
for me it was mostly the radio.
Dan Marino is most definitely in that video.
Because he's a big Miami Dolphins fan. And that's even a line from it, right?
Yes, the Dolphins made me cry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, that's the only video I remember. I think this was just the radio and just because I think this was on the pop radio stations, but I think it even got a little play on the alternative. We had an alternative radio station at the time, and I think it got airplay there.
Oh
And
yeah, it
yeah,
definitely bled over to those two
yeah,
for sure.
that alternative radio station has turned into a heavy metal station now or a rock station now, and I don't think it would have gotten that airplay that now that it did back then. So I think the fact that it was an alternative station, we had two really good ones in the Twin Cities, so I think it got
That's
airplay on
awesome.
both of them. So yeah,
It's funny that you mentioned that. Because you know, 30 years ago, Kevin, and that's what people say. What do you like? I would still say, well, my wheelhouse at the end of the day is 90s alt rock, whatever.
yeah,
What you would call alternative now, I honestly probably, and this is not me wearing my old man hat, I promise. I just can't. Hey, people like it, good for them. There's a song or two here I might like, but as a whole, I just can't. What's called alt rock now, I can't get into. I don't know, just not my taste.
yeah. I can see that's a whole other show.
Whole other
But
show.
I feel like there's a number of reasons that you can think of, right? Like just the hip hop influence of the last 10 years has had an influence on all types of music, the homogenization of a lot of music. I can see that. Like the stuff that gets called I couldn't even really point to the alternative rock scene, I feel like at this point because I think it's so just gone so genre specific into different things. So I'd have a hard time even painting what is considered alt rock at this point.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I said that I don't care. I just run my hands through her dark hair. Then I pray to God you gotta help me fly away and just let her cry. If the tears fall down like rain, let her sing. If it eases all her pain, let her go. Let her walk right out on me. And if the sun comes up tomorrow, let her be. Let her be.
What do you love about this album? I know we talked about a couple things, but yeah, what stands out about this album that just makes you kind of love it?
What's awesome about this album, and we just kind of talked about it still got classified as pop rock / alt rock because
Yeah.
people, I think, were still trying to discover what is alternative music
Hmm.
because of when people were thinking of pop rock in the early and mid 90s, you're also, okay, thinking that stuff from the late 80s. So Hootie the Blowfish, this was not a sound from the late 80s, right?
Yeah.
No, there's no synths and there's no drum machines. But what I love about this album is it has its upbeat moments. It definitely ebbs and flows, and it has peaks and valleys. And then it has its more serious songs,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the a little more lighthearted, goofy nature of "Only Want to Be with You." But the harmonies and the musicianship of the song are still really good.
Yep.
And even in the 90s and stuff we're still talking about now, obviously it's not a secret. This band coming from the South, the band has 3 white guys, and Darius Rucker's the lead singer, the face of the band, and he's a black man. And
Yeah.
the song "Time and Drowning" reflects on that, the lyrics and the struggles of America still going through that at that time in 1994,
Yeah.
and his point of view of it, and his voice. I mean, I think if I could just listen to someone sing, and I think he's done it in different genres too. He's definitely one of my favorite vocalists. So,
Yeah.
and the fact that I could just pop that CD in and listen to it with anyone.
Yeah, I think it's the ultimate in the middle of the grunge blow up and kind of the mid 90s alternative rock scene. It's this huge un 90s grunge album. And you're right, it's not 80s. It is unique. It's this it's so obvious that they were cutting their teeth in bars in the South. I mean, it's just
Oh yeah,
it has that feel of Southern rock, but it's not overly Southern rock. It has some connections with alternative rock, and you can tell it's guys who were trying to write sing along songs in a bar setting is what it feels like,
for
and
sure.
succeed in a massive way. And it's so catchy. It is more upbeat than the music of the time, where that was just a lot of downers, and the alternative rock scene had a lot of kind of people who felt bummed out about everything, and so it just has enough happy moments in it that it does feel so distinct. And I think that's what made it take off and be such a hit, is those elements just mix so well in the culture and just resonated so much with people.
And I think it helped even elevate some of those other post grunge 90. I'll still call them, though this will be a long description, post grunge 90s alt rock bands that kind of had that college flavor that maybe even
Yeah.
had albums before them, but because Hootie just became so big with that style, like Jim Blossoms, they had already made albums, they were already pretty well known, but people I feel like were able to rediscover, hey, cool college rock. It doesn't have to be grunge, or better than Ezra. I feel like
Yeah.
these other bands kind of around that same time had more that kind of college rock sound that you can, like you said, you can just tell when someone's been cutting their teeth and paying the bills going around the college bar circuit. The songs, the lyrics, just the energy, you can just tell.
Yeah. And I wonder how many people, like, so, we talked about this before, that you still go out and you play, you'll go and play bars, and you're doing doing some covers and stuff and doing kind of easy sing-along things. I wonder how many people kind of saw this band as like oh, I like the alternative rock, but this is another option that I can do. And how many people kind of saw them as like oh, I could do songs like this in a bar setting, and it could be a transition to, I can't bring the electric guitar, so I'll bring the acoustic guitar, and what am I going to sing? Because I feel like they fit so well with that, but yet they still have that connection to I still think of them as kind of a alternative pop rock, even though they're more pop rock. So I wonder how many people like kind of latched onto them as a nice transition.
Well, and it's actually something that's since you mentioned it, put in one of the other questions, but when I play, Let Her Cry and Hold My Hand are consistently, I doubt I play a gig without playing at least one, if not both of those, because again, they are great sing-along songs. Everyone knows Hold My Hand and Let Her Cry. So
right.
I'll have to start doing Only Want to Be With You. I think I've done it once or twice.
We'll get into why I like it. We'll get there, I swear. Why is this album important to you? And if it's not important to you, I always give people the other option of like, why do you think it's hold up? Or both, if you want to talk about both of them. So why is it important to you, or why do you think it's held up so well?
I'll talk about both. It's important to me because it was, we talked about the last album we did, there were some big songs by that band on that album, Live on the Thorn Copper. But, as much as I like that album, I wasn't like in love with it. This CD, again, listen to it start to finish on a consistent basis. Probably, and again, prior to this, even though I took guitar lessons on acoustic guitar, I was still Mr. Grunge rock guy. Once upon a time, I had hair, long hair, all that good stuff. But it's almost like this album was almost like allowed me to be like, hey, you can go rock out with an acoustic guitar too. And again, like we talked about, just the sing along songs, the sincerity and the lyrics, and I think it stands the test of time because, again, 30 years ago, I was listening to the CD with my mom, and my kids know Hold My Hand and Let Her Cry.
Yeah.
I mean, so they can sing along. Now, some of that was due to my awesome parenting. So, I think when you see three generations singing along to the same couple songs or appreciating the same album, I think that speaks for itself. And the fact that 30 years after this release, they're still selling out large pavilions in Dallas. Now, granted, I think some of it's the hunger factor, right? They don't play as much anymore. So when they're playing, the fans we want to go, because I've seen bands I like, and we go to that's our thing. We go to concerts. We travel and we go to concerts.
Sure.
I'd only seen Hootie once ever before. And my wife and I, we were in college at Baylor University, and of all the random bands to come play our college, Hootie and the Blowfish came and played, I think, in 2005. Just a random concert, and we were so we went.
Yeah.
She'd never seen them, I'd never seen them, and so we went. And it's one of our it was within the first year of us dating. So so the band as a whole has this sentimental kind of place in my heart too.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's awesome. I probably don't have as much a connection with them as more of, and I think is more of the nostalgia for it. I mean, again, even as an alt rock kid, as a punk rock kid, I remember this album and it just how much it blew up. And I don't know if I remembered this, if I mentioned this before, and I don't remember if it was before or after we hit record, but like I wanted to cover this album because I was like, it's kind of a light week, I'll be honest. And then you had mentioned it, and I was like, well, it's a great chance to have Kevin back on the show. So I'm glad you had mentioned it, so we could connect on it. And then when I started looking at it, I just looked at the numbers, and I'm going to go back to that 19th biggest selling album in the United States. That is huge. And so I was like, all right, I think some people, just like Live, are going to potentially look at them as a one-hit wonder, although their next album sold like gangbusters as well. But like, I don't care. This is something that is firmly planted for me in 90s, the 90s music scene. And it's something that I don't look back on and go, oh, it's kind of tired. It hasn't aged well. I think this has aged really, really well. And I think sincerity is, you use that word. A lot of pop rock cannot feel sincere. I do agree. I think this feels really, really sincere. And I think that's also made it stand up so well and last so well. So it may not be a super important album for me, but I do have a lot of respect for this album the more I kind of dug into it and listened to it.
Especially with the songwriting, the lyrics, like even Darius Rucker said, let her cry. He wrote that pretty obvious about a breakup. And, they write about, real things. This album again was huge. I mean, heck, it got them mentioned and featured. They weren't necessarily seen on the episode, but their song was on it, and they were mentioned on the episode of Friends, which at the time was the biggest sitcom in the world.
Yeah.
And one of their B-sides, I Go Blind, ended up being on the Friends soundtrack. And that's a staple in their set list when they play too. So it's a really good song also. But came out about the same time. But side note, their follow-up album, most sophomore albums don't sell as well, especially when you have something as massive as Cracked Review.
Yeah.
I think I love their follow-up album. The first single off that one, Old Man and Me. I think I've loved it more as I've served in the military and became a veteran and stuff, just because what the song is talking about. But anywho, side note, I love that album too.
Yeah.
But definitely Cracked Review is iconic. I still, especially in '94, we've talked about this. 2024, Weezer Blue Album, Live Throwing Copper. I mean, shoot, you do this. You've seen the anniversaries.
Yeah.
Then obviously Hootie. In my opinion, this is on the Mount Rushmore of 90s rock albums.
Yeah. The show I did last week was about a Rancid album, and one of the things that I found is like a list. Rolling Stone had a list of the top 40 albums from 1994 when it was like alternative rock's breakout into the mainstream. I should have gone back and tried to find that list, because I wonder if they include this on there. It'd be interesting to see if Rolling Stone, because it's including Rancid, but so it's all over the place. It's not just clearly including alternative, because that's a punk album. Really, really punk album.
Yeah.
So like, it'd just be interesting to see if they included this, because if you include this as well, then yes, this is the breakout album of the scene, because there's no way anything else in 1984 outsold this in the alternative rock scene. So.
No, other than I don't know, other than Nevermind maybe, or did this surpass that?
Is Nevermind 94 though? That's the question.
You're talking about 94? No,
Nevermind's earlier.
Nevermind was like 92 or something.
Yeah, so it was specific to 94, so that would make it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I forgot. Green Day Dookie. There's another one from 94. Another one. Holy cow.
Vitology comes out at the end of this year, 94.
Yes.
I think there's one I'm thinking about doing. It's a Pearl Jam album. I think Vitology is 94.
I think you're right. I think that's it.
So yeah, there's so many of them. So awesome. Anything else from that question about kind of why it's important or holds up?
Seen them in concert 19 years later, and they played pretty much this whole album along with other stuff. I mean, they played for almost 3 hours. When you've got that many hits, because he incorporated some of his obviously solo country hits as well.
Oh, okay.
Darius Rucker did. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All of us old Zennials and Gen Xers out there having a good old time.
I was kind of wondering about that, the idea that, not just because it's a 30-year anniversary of it, and I know they don't, like you said, they don't tour a ton, but I did kind of wonder, like, how much of this is still a big part of their set list, because, this is probably what a lot of people want to go see them for.
Yeah, it definitely made it. I think they didn't do Drowning, which
Hmm.
I don't think they did Drowning. No, I don't. I think that was like the one song. I'm about to go to like that setlist website and double check. They
Yeah.
did Time. They definitely did Time. They opened with I Go Blind, but I think Drowning was the only one where they didn't play it. And I was like Sad Panda for 5 seconds. I was like, you know, whatever. I just saw Hootie and the Blowfish and it was awesome.
Sad Panda. I like that.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about a lot of the tracks already, but just walk us through kind of some of your favorite tracks off this album, or just a deeper dive into any of those that you want to kind of call out. Because we've talked about a number of them, but yeah, let's go through some of our favorite tracks.
I tell you what, and we can get into the Only Want to Be With You. There's nothing deep about it. I'll explain. I just think it's a cheesy song, but that was their intent. That was their intent. All right, for that song. I mean, can you tell me a stronger start of 4 songs to an album that came out even that decade? Hannah Jane, which still shocks me, was not a single.
Yeah.
I mean, that song gets your attention.
Yeah.
And it's a other good, just catchy, song with some good harmonies and good melodies. But then you got Hold My Hand, which, I mean, one of the best sing-along songs out there. Then Let Her Cry, and then Only Want to Be With You. Those 4 talk about just coming out swinging on an album, and then they kind of mellow out with the next track, and then they come back with I think Time and Drowning.
Yeah.
But I do have to say my favorite song is probably Time, for various reasons. One, it was the first kind of little, outside of just playing regular chords, the first kind of little, and it's not hard because I'm not much of a riff player. I do basically chords and more of a rhythm player. But that little riff in Time, I learned that, and then it's just a really good song.
Yeah.
I like the message and the production of the lyrics. I mean, when a guy's produced, who did you say, REM and what? Some of the other people, Tracy Chapman, some of the other people. Their producer has skins on the wall, so knew what he was doing.
Yeah, John Mellencamp's the other kind of big one that he was known for.
Yeah, so this guy knows what he was doing, but the vocal arrangements of that song are awesome.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Drowning, the guitars in that song. I just really like the guitar work and the chorus. The chorus in that song is just really, really well done.
Yeah.
And Only Want to Be With You, I just think it's cheesy. That's really what it boils down to. There's nothing wrong with it. I just think it's cheesy. And maybe that's what makes it endearing to people who love it.
I think so. I think it makes it endearing. That's the one with the Dylan reference. That's going to always be as a Minnesota guy and a guy raised in Dylan in a household that celebrates Dylan. I think that also makes it. I think just that guitar opening, that acoustic guitar opening, which I feel like got copied so heavy. I mean, I think about so many bands who kind of copied that sound where it was, I don't know, there's something about that opening acoustic guitar. Yes, I know it's probably very, very simple. Again, I'm no musician, but like it's so catchy and it just feels so like makes you want to smile. So then when it gets into the cheesy lyrics, I think it fits so well. And it's just is like this incredible pop song. And I do love pop songs that are not pop songs. Like it's not sold as a pop song, but it totally is a pop song. And I love that idea.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's kind of this Trojan horse pop song that is just fantastic. So yeah. But I can see the cheesy lyrics throwing people off, but yeah, there's something about that one. I do agree. I mean, Hold My Hand, Let Her Cry, and Time, and then I Only Want to Be With You. I mean, honestly, pick 4 singles off of any album, even crossover in other genres. I would, and this is not my normal style, but man, you put those 4 songs up against anybody, and it'd be hard to lose out because they're just so good.
Especially just coming out back to back to back.
Yeah.
I was gonna pull up. I think there's something else. Let's see. On the original album, of course, if you go on Spotify now, you have the 25th anniversary deluxe edition,
Yeah.
which has tons of extra tracks. But oh yeah, Not Even the Trees. That was a good one. Oh, they played that one at the concert.
Okay.
That was one I had not really listened to a whole heck of a lot, but it's a really cool, sweet song. But Motherless Child at the very end is just a little a cappella thing Darius Rucker does. And I think that was something he had done. He sang and wanted to do that for his mom.
That one's an interesting one that you would call out, because you talked about this idea that he's black and the rest of the guys are white, and they were playing in the South, which I think, everybody's aware of some of the tension that is there. And then that's an old spiritual, and so like that is a very poignant way of ending the album. It really, really jumped out to me. And I know it's only a minute, and it's barely over a minute. I think it's pretty brief, but it really jumped out as like, I feel like it was very intentional to include that at the end as just kind of because I know that I watched some video on kind of their history, and they struggled. There were times where people were not very happy to see, a black man up on stage, and in certain bars were not as happy about it. And so I feel like that was almost an intentional inclusion, just that throwback to the old spiritual. And it's a really poignant ending to, again, that you talked about sincerity. That song, that moment on the album feels very sincere and just feels like a wonderful way to close out. I know it's not big and extravagant, but it's a really poignant ending to the album.
Right, and that may be part of the layers of just you can just feel it in his voice.
Yeah,
like I said, not only. So I did look up. His mom had passed away in 1992, so she unfortunately did not get to see, was not around to see his massive success. So not only was that a bit of love, being recorded for his mom, but like you said, kind of pulling from his own, culture and so forth, and just kind of you can hear his heart in his singing that. And I think it's not a long track either, and you can hear it pouring out. So that just made me become even more. But I like hearing some emotion in a singer's voice. I really enjoy listening to him sing.
Yeah. It feels like a more vulnerable moment, because in general, again, he is very smooth.
Absolutely.
His vocal delivery is so smooth, and it is so pop friendly, but then that moment feels, I don't know, it feels different, and I don't know, I think it's a really wonderful closing.
Yes, I think vulnerable is a good word to describe it. Yeah. He lays it all out there.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I am surprised Hannah Jane never became a single, because they could have had a sixth single off this. I didn't notice that this time too. I was listening this week and I was like, this wasn't a single. Okay.
It's a no skip though in my book. You pop that bad boy in. 4th of July would be a great time to do it. I agree with you. I think you're barbecuing, you got friends over, slap that bad boy on Spotify and let it go.
Yeah, no skip. I agree with that. That's a good explanation. Which you're right. We throw back to live. I really enjoy that Throwing Copper album. There's a couple I could skip, and this one I never had any desire to be like, oh, that's enough of this. There was at no point. And again, not really my style of music in a lot of ways, but at no point was like, let's go ahead. So
agreed. Yep.
Awesome. All right, on to our last question. And I know we've talked about a lot of these. I mean, these kind of bleed into each other a little bit here, but somebody's not heard this album, which totally impossible. There's no way you haven't heard this, or there's no way you haven't been walking through the grocery store and heard one of those 4 singles before. I know you have, but if you were going to tell somebody to go check this album out and give it a deeper dive listen, don't just think of it as this album that came out in this big hit in the 90s, but you're going to have somebody go check this out. What would you tell them?
I would tell them that not only it's a good album and it has stood the test of time because these guys are still playing, but like I mentioned earlier, when it spans multiple generations, it's good. And like you kind of mentioned, they were obviously influenced by REM, who was influenced by others. I mean, heck, again, David Crosby is on Hold My Hand, but 30 years later, you can't tell me that there are not bands or vocalists or songwriters, especially if they're doing kind of what you've described as Southern rock, which is a thing,
Yep.
that are not influenced by this album, by Darius Rucker's vocal stylings, or even just the way they played the opening acoustic guitar in Only Want to Be With You. They weren't pioneers for that, but they did that on that song, which was a huge hit. So I'm guarantee you others have emulated that.
Yep.
So their songwriting in this album for sure has influenced others in similar genres. I mean, I don't know if, anyone and I like emo. I like punk and emo. I don't know if anyone over there is being influenced by it, but you can definitely, the country,
Yeah.
modern pop rock, again, Southern rock. You go to a bar and grill or something, some old dude like me is going to be up there probably pulling a few of these out to play. Got to get that tip jar filled.
Yep.
And that's what I would tell. It's like it was a culturally important in the 90s to the music scene, and it has stood the test of time. And I think they're just good songs.
Yeah.
Even if it's not in your wheelhouse, you will like at least one song.
Yeah.
I can't imagine someone listening to this with an open mind not liking at least one song.
Yeah. You mentioned the bar and grill. I don't even think it has to be somebody up there playing. I bet you if you're hanging out in a bar on Friday night, just hanging out with friends, and one of these songs, one of those singles especially comes on, you could probably see the mood in the bar change. I think maybe not Time as much because Time's a little more serious. Those other three, I feel like you could totally get her. You just see the mood lighten because I think it just has that feel to it and that kind of infectious. It does feel like a perfect album to have on in the background of a bar that's just, people are just hanging out, and this could be a soundtrack to that experience in a lot of ways. So yeah.
And like you mentioned, the upbeat tone of it kind of definitely helps. Look, again, big grunge fan, but there's not too much upbeat about, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, and Nirvana. Look, I love those. I'm standing on. They're the foundation of my rock fandom. But yeah, if I'm trying to have a good time with my friends and not be in my feels, I'm not going to listen. We're not putting that on. We're not putting on In Utero. We're going to listen to some to something like some Hootie or some Collective Soul.
Yeah,
so, absolutely.
I feel like this is the other thing that I would tell people is I know the name Hootie and the Blowfish has gotten some flack probably. Like I do occasionally wonder if they look back at it and go, man, I know it stood out, but I hate it now. But like, I think there are people who probably think of it as a bit of a joke, and that would be my other thing is I put that aside. Any jokes you've heard about it, he's not Hootie, they're not the Blowfish. Like this is a collective band, and they put out something really, really wonderful that it struck a chord with so many people. That's worth going back and checking out and trying to understand why this did, because this, again, you look at those sales numbers, this clearly struck a chord with people, and that's worth going back and checking out.
And especially with the name as unique as that. I think he has said before, Hootie was a nickname of a college buddy of his, and I don't know where Blowfish came from, but they may have they probably thought it was ironic at first, but when it sticks and people remember your name, I mean, sometimes that's the way it happens. Like, well, there's so many stories of bands that their name is like, we just kind of pulled that out of nowhere, and we were going to go back and rename it, but that horse is already out of the barn, so we rolled with it. You listen to obviously 90s CCM Punk, MXPX. Their name was just Magnified Plaid, but when they make the posters, they would put M, and Mike Herrera or whoever was doing the posters, instead of a period, would do a little X.
Yeah.
So it'd be big M, little X, big P, little X, and everyone just thought the name was MXPX. So it was like, well, that's what we're rolling with.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a solid band name. I don't have any problems with it. I just have the feeling that they've encountered some teasing about it at some point, but that's a whole other thing.
But 40 years later, and when you have got more money than Davy Crockett, I'm pretty sure they like laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long, long way
That is our kind of breakdown of Cracked Review by Hootie and the Blowfish, again, released July 5th, 1994, celebrating a 30-year anniversary. Kevin, I know you told us kind of last time where people can find you online, but give us one more time where people can find you online if they want to follow along.
Sure. On Instagram, Kevin B. Duke. And honestly, look me up on Spotify, Kevin Duke. I don't have, even though I'm a musician, I've recorded, I don't have an artist page, but I keep my profile open because I think, honestly, my dream job, whatever, I would love to be like a Sirius XM DJ.
Yeah.
I love making playlists. Pass me the aux cord. I'm that guy. I love making playlists for people, and it's not even just for me. So anyways, more to the story, I actually made kind of my own little playlist for the tour that Hootie's on right now, the Summer Camp with Trucks tour, but I have other playlists on there too. So Kevin Duke, there's other Kevin Dukes on there, but it'll be the same picture that's on my Instagram profile picture. So yeah, peruse my playlist. Don't judge me on some of them, but I enjoy doing things like that. So and I have one just for that tour that's on right now. So yeah.
There we go. Well, that's great. We'll have to get that included in the show notes so people can easily find it here you can find it on Spotify. And this would be my dream job, is sitting around talking to you about music. So, that's, I don't get to do this for a job, but I get to do it enough that it brings me a little joy, is sitting around talking to you and other people about music. So
yeah, maybe I'll start like a pirate radio station. Are those still things? I don't know.
Is radio still a thing? And that'd be
no,
the
yeah,
bigger
you're
question.
right.
We're so fortunate in Minnesota. We have got a really, really great locally based radio station. I think it's a rarity for sure.
It is. I think same thing. I don't listen to satellite, or not satellite. I don't listen to FM. I do listen to satellite radio occasionally. Usually I'm just listening to my own playlist because by God, I made them. Yeah. They're good.
Yeah. I still have a CD player in my car because my car's kind of old. And I still lug around a bunch of CD books. And what are we listening to today? Kids, pick something out. And I'll tell you why I love this album and why I keep it in my car so we can listen to it. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I bought a new truck last fall. Does not have a CD player. So we kept my other car because it was worth more to us as a backup vehicle than what we would have gotten on a trade-in. So that has a CD player. So whenever we're in that, the kids want to listen to that because they want me to play some of the band I was in.
Sure.
So anyways, they made Daddy feel like a rock star for a little bit.
Well, as my kids listen to the show, and I don't force them. They listen to they more listen to the youth group one. They think that other podcast is more interesting than me talking about music. So I haven't been able to get any of them really addicted to music. So that's my pretend to be a rock star in front of my kids, is I've got a podcast.
No, I think it's cool. Obviously, when we did the last one, I sent it out to all my different communities, my circles, my church, friends, Army Reserve unit, work. So
that's the show. The show I did on June 15th. It was probably too much. I mean, it was like it's overwhelming because there were so many great albums that come out that day, and so I wanted to include them all. And I probably bit off more than I can chew, but I got it out. There was a number of people who had never done anything like this before, and that was really cool to I'm not trying to, I've gotten one, I'm going to use real loose term, celebrity on the show, but that's not what I'm trying to do necessarily. Like, I think it's actually kind of more fun to, talk to people. And there's a couple of people who've never done it before, and they just had some really great, insightful things to say. And it was like, oh yeah, this is what I want. I want this kind of personal connection to stuff. I think that's something I can provide, and it's, easier than trying to chase celebrities who will probably turn me down. So, if I can get one, I'll take it. But I think it's more fun to just kind of talk about why music's important to people and why they've connected with it and why they still are interested in it 30 years later. So,
well, just even similar stories that you and I would share living on complete.
Yeah.
I'm in Texas, you're in Minnesota, complete different parts of the U.S., but yet we experienced this in this 90s music at the same time, and obviously conversation for different podcasts, but the 90s youth group thing.
Yep.
So how many things were shared experiences in completely different communities?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. The whole idea, we really thought when we were doing, Carmen plays where we were doing like the champion for youth group or stuff like that, we really thought we were doing something really unique. Come to find out, every youth group was doing those. We were not the only one. That was the most amazing thing I discovered when CCM Twitter kind of blew up and people started talking about Christian music and people were talking about that experience. That was the moment I noticed when other people were talking about doing that. And I was like, well, this was a nationwide thing. People were doing this in youth groups everywhere. We were really not doing anything all that unique. It was such a like aha moment, and also such a like it was, I don't know, it's just this weird, it was this weird realization that I still think about, and it just brings a smile to my face, and how much my mind was blown 30 years later. So yeah.
That's funny.
Awesome. Well, we've gone on a while. We've gone off on a tangent here at the end, but this is the fun stuff to talk about. So, I just want to say thanks again for joining me. Thanks for being my first repeat guest. I'm really excited to have you back on the show. We'll have to keep on talking about other albums you want to do. I love having you on the show. So, thanks so much for coming and joining me and talking again.
Absolutely. Hey, I enjoy doing this. Looking forward to when we have to do a Rich Mullins one.
Yeah.
So, I'll be your three-peater.
For sure. It's not till 2025, so I need to sustain this. I started looking ahead, and I don't think there is one until 2025, so we'll have to do that. There's a Jars of Clay one later, but somebody else has also requested that. So
I know you love Jars of Clay, so
that's my point too. Is like, I don't love Jars of Clay, but I'm super excited to have somebody on the show who wants to talk about them, because clearly they are important to a lot of people, and that's I love the idea of. Like, yes, like the next episode that it'll have come out by now. I'm doing the Dingies. There's an album by the Dingies, Sundown to Midnight. Pretty obscure punk ska band. Even in the Christian circle. I was so excited to talk about that album. So obviously, I'm still going to choose things that are important to me. But I really am genuinely excited to hear people talk about things that I may not be in love with. Like on the June 15th show, Chris Unthank came in and joined and talked to me about, oh man, I'm going to forget who they are. Out of Eden. And it was great. Oh, yeah. I was so excited to have him on the show to talk about it, because it's not an album I have any real interest in, but he loves it. And it was so great to hear him talk about why he loves it. It was perfect. I was so happy at the end of that interview. So yeah. Anyway, now we've really gone off the rails.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, thanks again. I'm so glad you could join me again, and we'll look forward to having you on again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Once again, I just want to say thanks to Kevin for joining me. I was so glad to have him back on the show. It's always fun to talk to him about music and about some of these albums that we can look back on fondly. And thanks so much for joining us today and listening in. Let us know what you thought. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What are your thoughts on this album, this iconic album? I think iconic might be a good word for it. At the very least, this incredibly popular and high-selling album that, that's why I like talking about these things, these albums that kind of have meaning in pop culture. So I was super excited to talk to Kevin about it. And let us know what you thought about this show or about that album in particular. You can find me on Twitter at CalebTheSpy, no spaces. I'm also on Instagram at CalebTheSpy with underscores. And you can email the show at CalebTheSpyPodcasts, that's with an S at the end, podcasts, because I have more than one, at gmail.com. Again, CalebTheSpyPodcasts at gmail.com. No spaces or underscores in that. If there are albums that should be on my calendar because they're worth celebrating, let me know and I can try and get them added. I'll do my best. I can't always find release dates, but I do my best to get those added to the calendar. If you want to join me to talk about an album, the easiest way to probably do that is to follow me on Twitter. I'm not going to lie. When I'm looking for show ideas, and if I don't have somebody in mind to guest, I will throw it out on Twitter and just say, hey, I'm looking to do a show on this. Let me know if we can find a time to chat about the album. That'd be great. Also, if you're scanning ahead a couple of weeks, maybe even a month in advance, and you see an album that's coming up that you want to talk about, let me know, and I'll do my best. I have had a number of inquiries, so I'm doing my best to remember everybody and figure everything out. I probably need to get a better system for that, but let me know, and we can try and make something work. Please subscribe and share the podcast. If you're so inclined, leave a rating or review. I've heard it is the most effective way to spread the word about podcasts. And most of all, I just want to say, if you engage with me at all on social media, I just want to say thanks. I put a lot of time and energy into setting up the daily posts, so seeing people get excited to revisit or discover older albums is always a thrill. And if you enjoy this show, you might also enjoy the other show I do. I know we mentioned it before when I was talking with Kevin. The other show I do with my friend Scott, it's called I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. And it's not just a podcast where we reminisce about our youth and our youth group experience, but we're trying to go back and interview fellow 90s youth group kids and some 2000 kids and find out where they're at now. We're not trying to convert anybody or change anybody, whether they're still at the same church they were raised in or they've left the faith entirely. We just want to hear their story and kind of see how that youth group experience has impacted their lives. The music at the beginning and the end of this show is the instrumental version of the song Sing It Out at Street Level by Peg and the Rejected. Thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, so Hootie the Blowfish, that's who we're talking about. Sorry, I'm also getting so I'm using my wife's MacBook, and she's getting a plethora of text messages that are distracting me. I'm about to tell her something so popular.